You are listening to the Small Town Big Arts podcast. I'm your host, Jeffrey Kirshner, the CEO of the Academy Center of the Arts in Lynchburg, Virginia. In my own work as an arts leader, I have found it difficult to access resources for arts organizations and artists serving smaller communities. On each episode, Small Town Big Arts sets out to drive conversations and provide inspiration for those serving smaller communities through the arts. If you like what you hear, please rate and review us and share with your friends and colleagues who are working to promote the arts in smaller communities across America. You can also learn more by visiting us at smalltownbigarts.com. Welcome to Season 2 of Small Town Big Arts. Going to be taking a little bit of a different approach this season, going to be, rather than focusing solely on organizations, which are great models for small communities that are looking to deliver the arts. And I'd recommend Season 1 for a lot of fantastic examples of specific organizations and specific communities. But this season, we're going to be focusing on subject matters. So I decided to bring back a guest of ours that we had in our Season 1 May 2nd episode. If you want to reference back to that episode, it's a great episode about facility depreciation and the pressures that maintaining a facility put on an arts organization. And this was a Cyrus Pace at the Jefferson Center in Roanoke, Virginia, who is a good friend and a neighbor in Roanoke, Virginia, which is about an hour from Lynchburg, Virginia, where I run the Academy Center of the Arts. Cyrus and I have biweekly conversations that we started during COVID as a means to collaborate and commiserate and help each other navigate the storm that was COVID, both personally and professionally. Cyrus also is a teacher at Virginia Tech. And last night, I had the honor and privilege of having Cyrus and one of his graduate students, Liz Gray, come and speak to our board about facilities and endowments. So really fantastic to have Cyrus here. So what we're going to talk about today is a bit of basically the subscription model versus the membership model and where things are going. And there has been a lot in arts, in arts administration news of late. There's been a lot of conversation in and around what's happening with professional theater in America right now, particularly LORT theaters. These are equity houses in cities across America. Their subscription bases have been shrinking for quite some time, and COVID was really escalated that quite a bit. But a lot of these organizations, a lot of these companies are in major markets, large cities. Cyrus and I are both in communities that are smaller. Roanoke's about 100,000, Lynchburg's about 80,000. So then it might be good for us to talk a little bit about that. So Cyrus, just to get things started, you all have a subscription series. At the Academy Center of the Arts where I am, we do not. So we have a membership program. So I think maybe to begin, so let's talk a little bit about the benefits and the merits of the subscription series you have and what that does for the Jefferson Center.
Sure. So we have models in 3 different series for subscriptions. We have something we call Star City, which is generally between 5 and 8 shows. You'd think of this as shows in the Americana, bluegrass, maybe more popular music. For example, this season we have Graham Nash coming, Joan Osborne, Dan Tyminski in that series. And then we have a series we call Big Lick Vibes, which is basically jazz and improvised music in the main hall. Also, Star City is also in the main hall. There's 3 shows in that season. Sometimes there's 2, sometimes there's 3, sometimes there's 4. And then we have a club series, which is really jazz club. We usually do 6 to 8 of those shows. So we sell individual subscriptions to each of those series. And we've been doing that in the main room for 22 years. In fact, the model for programming here started with the idea that a bulk of these tickets would be sold in subscriptions. And of course, over the years, just like every arts organization, every ticketed environment in the arts, at least, for performing arts, those numbers have dwindled over time. At the same time, however, it does do some things for us that we appreciate. One, it brings in quite a bit of cash flow at the beginning of the season, right? People are saying, hey, I believe in all 5 or all 8 of these shows. We've got, quite a few people who are, buy all 3 series, for example. So you're getting cash flow at the beginning of your fiscal year, right? When you're paying artists, deposits and those sort of things. So I think that's one upside just on the financial side. Two, you're getting people to come to shows that they probably would not have come to if you had not included them in this.
Yeah, and that's a big thing. And
It's a big thing. So you might, for example, have Derek Trucks and Susan Tedeschi, and then the next night you've got Nickel Creek. The next performance in that series, you've got Nickel Creek. And then the third thing might be someone, I might use Aoife O'Donovan as an example here, a younger singer-songwriter who's been opening for major acts, but then you decide to present that act as part of the series, not as an opener, but as part of the main performance. And then you have whatever number of subscriptions you've sold already baked into that show. And the good news in that, of course, is you're probably paying less because that artist isn't necessarily a premier performing artist making 30, 40, 50 grand a night. But you already underwrote the risk in that show. And then, of course, the folks who are already fans of that artist are going to come out on top of the subscriptions you sold. That's another benefit. And I'd say, I guess the third one would be though the people who subscribe to you become very, very loyal to what you do. We find, I should probably have looked at the percentages, but many of them do also donate to the organization, right? They say, listen, I'm buying all the ticket packages for myself and my spouse at $650 for the season all in for Star City. We're going to send you that money, but we're also going to include our annual gift when we're doing that, because we know that being a ticket buyer matters, but also donating to your organization matters. So when we start to think of those who are going to donate to us annually, or maybe through a campaign, we go to our subscribers as a first call, because those folks have been here for years and years and years and years and years and care deeply about the seats that they sit in and the community of people around them that they can expect to see when they come to the shows.
Cyrus, what's the percentage of when you have a show and you have individual ticket purchasers and your subscribers, what's the percentage in the house of subscribers to individual ticket purchases?
Right. So it depends on whether or not we project the show to sell out, right? So like we're doing Graham Nash this season that I mentioned. So that show will likely sell out in an 850 seat room. We'll sell 850 or comps or artist comps or whatever else. But in Star City this year, we've gotten, I think, if I looked at the last numbers, around 185 subscriptions. There are years where we had 300 or 400 subscriptions. So half of the room's risk was underwritten by.
Wow, that's amazing.
Yeah. And it's why it's so hard to let go of that model. Why would you, right? Why would you upset the apple cart? And so now at a little less than 200, I'm still underwriting, in a way, a quarter of the risk in the room on a sellout show. Now, again, there are other shows that are probably only going to sell 350 tickets or 400 tickets, and 185 of those are already purchased. Right. So that, I mean, for me, it's really about underwriting risk, but the bigger benefit is building relationship with those folks. I've got people who have started subscribing 22 years ago and are still subscribing today. They still sit in the same two seats, and they come to everything that we do and really appreciate that relationship to the organization.
Yeah. And I think that that's a thing for us here at the Academy that my background before I was here was I was an artistic director of a theater company, and one of the thing, and we ran subscriptions, and one of the great benefits of that is exactly what you spoke to, is that there is your risk tolerance is a lot lower in regards to presenting something that may not be as well known, has a ton of artistic value, something you want to introduce to the community. That they may not otherwise come to. And I have found, and we'll probably get into this a little bit here, but we really in many ways are a new organization here at the Academy Center of the Arts since we opened our historic theater 5 years ago. So when we launched, we made a decision not to move forward with the subscription series, but instead to do a membership-based approach, which is really very popular in the sort of historic theater setup, that exists out there through LHAT. And it's been good and bad. One of the things that it allows us to do, the membership structures, we have a lot of freedom of when and how we book what we book. So we can kind of roll with it, right? And so whatever becomes available to us, we can we have a lot of flexibility in grabbing it and presenting it. Our timelines are also a little bit more flexible, so we're not feeling pushed to release a season. We can really move quarter to quarter and not have that pressure to have our marketing materials all together at once with all the stuff. But that's really helpful to us. And I think in a time when people are much more, whether we like it or not, it's a lot more transactional out there these days, right? That people are sort of choosing to go to things as it comes up and aren't doing a lot of forward planning. I don't know, Cyrus, too. Do you think that's generational? I, I
It's generational, but people are very clearly, in our environment, we're going to sell 40% of our tickets for something people are really excited about. In the first few days it's on sale.
Mhm.
We're going to sell another 20% between that date and about 2 weeks in advance of the show. And then people are sorting out whether they feel well enough to come to the show still.
Yeah,
Their buying habits have changed because of the pandemic, and they're waiting to feel, decide if they feel well enough. It used to be before the pandemic, it was, FOMO, right? Fear of missing out. I don't want to commit to that because it could be something cooler happening. It's not that. People are waiting to say, I want to make sure that I feel okay, well enough to go and be at the show. And they're willing to give up, especially in small halls, which is probably another part of this conversation, right? In our halls, wherever you sit, it's going to be a pretty great experience. So people aren't driving themselves to make sure they're in
that's a
the
great
first four
point.
rows,
Yeah, you're not in an arena where you're going to end up in the third third tier or whatever, and Beyonce is the size of an ant.
Right. Well, and although then on the other side of that, you'd say, well, it's a small venue, so people get scared that somehow it'll sell out and they won't get a ticket. And we've experienced that too, but pretty rarely, because the music business is structured in such a way that the artists you can get for the size venue you're in, i.e., the fees that you can afford to make sense of the ticket pricing in your market at the cap that you have in your room, it is going to be what it is, right? In other words, we did Father John Misty in the spring, sold it out right up to the deadline of selling it out, right? If Father John Misty could have sold
Mhm.
another 1,000 tickets in this market, which would have then driven people to our show to make sure they had a chance to see it, they would have done the show at another venue in our market that had another 1,000 seats.
Yeah, yeah.
It all sort of normalizes over time in terms of the market, and that negotiation process generally leads to uh, that sort of balance point of fee versus ticket pricing and venue size.
Well, so we set out. So again, Cyrus this is a 22-year subscription model that has existed. We have a 5-year membership that it has existed, and again decided to roll this out because of the LHAP model. I want to get a little bit to what this means in regards to donor dollars and the benefits and the pitfalls, because Cyrus brought up the fact that this relationship that exists with the patron is in many ways much. What I'm kind of curious at the end of this is, like, can Cyrus convince me? I'm not. This is not. He
Yeah,
may not
that's okay.
want to, but I'll be interesting at the end of this conversation. Do I feel right 5 years in? Do we need to examine the subscription model versus the membership model? And I don't know the answer to that. And we'll see if maybe we come to some closer conclusion. But one of the things with the membership model is it really is about annual donor dollars. So it's essentially just the name for annual donors. But what you provide the individuals who are members is benefits to the shows and the activities that you have in the facility. So if you were a member at the Academy Center of the Arts, what that means is you have early first access to the tickets. So there's a member on sale that happens prior to the sale to the general public. So that's one benefit. Other benefits that exist are things like access to, on certain shows, a members lounge where there's an open bar and you get to gather. We give that benefit to members as well as some of our corporate donors. There's also a members line at the concessions area, so they can, and not that you couldn't do this with your subscribers too, obviously, but there's a members line, and members get, faster concessions delivery. Uh,
What's the donation amount to be a member?
so it starts at $75
Okay.
and then moves up. I think we have 5 tiers, and the membership benefits increase with each level that you are. And then the memberships too can be done in a one single payment, or they can be in monthly installments, depending on what the member wants. But what this also means, so they are connected to what's going on. They have early access. One benefit we also see is that we see memberships increase when shows are released that are very popular.
Yeah.
So when we have, so we just talked about Tedeschi Trucks, so we'll use that as an example. So when we had Tedeschi Trucks here, we saw a huge increase in memberships because people wanted that early access to the tickets, or they suddenly were reminded of the value of the organization and thought, oh, they're bringing this thing that I really love, so I want to make sure that I, with my donation, express that I approve of this, right? I'm excited by it. It has value to me. I want to support the organization. So we also see when we have on sales that we see that there's a spike in donor dollars at that point. But I will say, in talking to Cyrus, I really miss being able to curate activities. Our risk threshold is much lower. So we do really operate with a lot of our ticketed programs, really thinking about the much more in the free market, and just like, is the consumer going to buy this? Are we going to be able to sell at least 500 tickets at our 800 seat house to this particular act, and thinking a lot less about does this have artistic value that we want to provide our community.
It's
But yeah,
it's an interesting point. I'd like to say over the long haul, the subscription model does result in being able to take some more artistic risk. And I'd say we have been a model of that being true. At the same time, some of the one-off shows, which we call shows out of series, right? Just standalone shows, which do have slightly different structure, which I want to talk about too. But the risk in those shows isn't any different if the artist is someone that we have some complexity in projecting what they might sell or understanding what they might be worth in the market.
Yeah.
What I will say is here's what's similar about the two models. We're both thinking about the season as a full fiscal year. We know that certain shows may generate surplus. Some shows might operate with deficit, but over the long haul, it's all going to equal out, and our organizations generate this sort of underwriting necessary to make sense of continuing the work, or hopefully it does, right?
Yeah, they both are underwriting models.
Yeah, they're both underwriting models. And so I would say one of the downsides, honestly, to the subscription model is the fact that the deal structures can be more complicated, right? Mm-hmm. You look at a show, and unrelated to artistic value, does the show make sense in this market, or does it not make sense in this market? All right, you're building deal structure. You don't have the agency saying, oh, I see this is part of a subscription model at a performing arts center. Because what they instantly start thinking is, oh, you're the Durham Performing Arts Center, or you're attached to Duke, or you're at Virginia Tech and you're the Moss Center. And the answer is no, we're not. We don't have $1 million the university gives us to instantly put you in this series. Right. So the downside is the deal structures are a little more complicated, and the agencies expect you to pay more because they know or assume you have more underwriting for series-based programming.
Interesting. Yeah.
And third, and this is the kicker, when you need the pinnacle artist, that anchor date artist, when you need that artist that's an anchor for your series, they're going to, and you need them on a certain date, you're going to pay a premium for them
just to get them in there. And I think
Yeah.
that that was one of the things whenever we've talked and we've had our conversations, that's always a pressure point I hear from you as you're trying to get your season lined up is that stress of getting the right thing in. And we're sort of moving through it much more it's much more fluid. I mean, absolutely we're still looking for anchor acts. We're looking for things that are going to boost the memberships 100%. Like we had that happen actually this year. There was, anybody who's booking music out there, things got really, really slowed down there. There was this weird moment this year. And so we got really panicked because we needed some things that were going to boost memberships. And it did finally happen, but we weren't on the kind of timetable that you were on. We could kind of let them happen when they were going to happen. And then interestingly enough, they all happen. They're all like in the fall, right? They're just all sitting in the fall.
Well, it's exactly the same thing we have. We have most of our stuff is in October, November, December, and we're light in, late winter and spring, early spring. And uh we're experiencing the same problem. Basically, what I'm trying to say, it's harder than it's ever been to book acts in small markets that make sense for the size venue you have. I've never seen it this hard in 13, 14 years. So uh the other challenge, of course, is and I have to, handle this with kid gloves. This part of the conversation is if you've got subscribers that started subscribing with you when they were in their early 50s and had the money to do that, and they've been here for 22 years with you, they're in their 70s, maybe some of them in their early 80s, and they're going to age out. That's part of it. But these acts that they think are still out touring, that they expect to see in your venue,
Mm,
particularly as part of the series that they've been buying for 22 years, it those acts really aren't touring on that level. And
yeah,
some of
yeah.
them that are, it's the classic one remaining member of the band thing. And the show's not going to be that great, but you're going to pay a premium for the name recognition. And I'm not necessarily against that if it's a great show.
Yep.
And people get to say, I remember seeing this band in 1976 and it changed my life. I get it. You know what I mean? I'm not against that. I'm just saying it's harder and harder to find bands that are touring because the bands are also aging out in a lot of cases. So if you're a subscriber person, right,
Mhm.
you're thinking about those acts that you wish were still touring that you saw at Jefferson Center 20 years ago. And so two things have happened. One, they're not on the road anymore. Or two, their career worked out and they're playing bigger venues now, right? They're not going to play a 700, 800 seat venue and it's
Well,
small.
yeah, and that generational thing is a thing, right? And this might be kind of a good segue because one of the things I wanted to talk to Cyrus about is what we think the future might be, or what it should be, or what we hope it will be. Because I know what's happening in the LORT theaters and the professional theaters is that again their subscriber base is aging out. So the way that they consume uh what they're expecting from the season is not necessarily lining up with some of the cultural shifts that are happening in regard generationally, right? In terms of what people want to see and what they're interested in connecting to. And as Cyrus talking about, just practically, like what's available, right? What's out there, who's performing, who's not performing. And so in listening to you, one of the things that is sort of coming to my mind when I'm thinking is like, could we do both? Could we do a membership, but also offer some sort of subscription series, where there's like a pick three or something. The thing that immediately comes to my mind, and particularly when we talk about smaller community arts organizations, is I'm immediately thinking about my team and capacity to run both things.
Well, I think you'd be right, and I'm not sure there'd be an upside other than the loyalty that's created between those subscribers and they're holding on to those seats that they know they get for all three or all five of those shows or whatever it may be.
Yeah.
So I still think there's a model for it, but only in art music, only in, you know, again, jazz is it still an okay model for this, I think, because jazz fans are going to come out to every opportunity to see jazz in a particular market. And might only be three of them or five of them, but they're going to come out to every one of them. And so we're not talking about big numbers here. We're talking about 80 or 100 people total but 100 people that you have built in and you're building a relationship to them over time, I think there's some benefit to that. But despite your effort in this podcast, I don't think I would talk you into doing subscriptions. So there's another part to this which we're getting at with the generational part, which is we need to talk about, equity and accessibility too, right? So in a sense, membership programs and subscriptions tell the community the wealthy people who have money to donate and can buy a $650 series are going to get the best seats in the house before you even get access to this show.
Yeah, yeah.
So obviously there are people who are solving that. They're saying, well, listen, we don't scale our room so that the premium seats, they're the most expensive, but we hold 20% of those seats for others who may not otherwise be able to afford it, right? But that's even more complicated than a subscription model. How do people?
That has its own, yeah.
Yeah, that right. So, there another downside, which I would encourage me not would encourage me to say don't do a subscription model, is there are some downsides to the level of ownership your subscribers have as well.
Right, right. The expectations that they have, the pressures they're
Yeah, yeah, and I know that you likely find the same thing. The folks who donate to us at the major and leadership gift levels are the least, um, historically have been the less likely to expect specific things of us in terms of programming.
Hmm.
They are not politicizing or active. They don't politicize their interest in what we present. They're
Yeah.
not activist in what we're presenting. But subscribers, on the other hand, who are transacting with you with an expectation of seeing a certain kind of entertainment, a certain quality of entertainment, a certain, their value systems come at play, and you get a lot of feedback, which of course can be good.
Yeah.
There's also a downside to some of that because you're not ever going to meet everybody's expectation.
Yeah, that's interesting because I will say that the membership setup, right? And I think you are right when I really think about it. When I think about our largest dollar donors, they tend to be individuals who are not putting pressure on us in regards to what we're doing. It
Right.
tends to be that they have a sense of sort of the bigger picture, why this is important to the community, both culturally, economically. Like they get that in a way that the sort of more transactional, uh, and that may not be completely fair because donors give for lots of different reasons. But clearly, if you're buying a subscription, right, you're buying tickets, and so that's a transaction as opposed to, and you have an expectation of what you get back from that, that is transactional. And I will say with the membership setup, it is a little bit more clear, because it's directly the it's directly individual giving. I mean, that's what it is. You're saying
Right.
you are a donor, right? You are giving to this institution as an institution for the big picture, right? But then as a thank you, right, we want to engage with you on a higher level and give you these perks and help you feel good about the fact that you're doing this thing, right? And so I do think that a lot of those members are not putting pressure on us like, as a member, I want you to do X, Y. I've never heard that. I've never heard a member say to me, as a member, I'm expecting you to do this thing.
Right.
Now, there is a reality that if we present things that those members are not interested in, they're not going to continue a lot of them are probably not going to continue their membership. But
That's right. That's also right.
but they're looking at it theoretically, they're looking at it somewhat differently because it's not, they're going to get their membership and they're going to look at the shows as they come and they're going to choose what they come to or not come to. And when they do choose to come to it, they're like, oh, I have these benefits. Isn't this nice? And so I think that is helpful. I mean, we don't feel a pressure here, to do a particular. Well, I mean, we do have pressures about what we're doing. We all do, right? We all have people who tell us what they'd like to
Right.
see, not see. But it's not happening in that way.
Yeah, and in your case, you have a very strong sponsorship program. So I'm not sure you would benefit from subscriptions um, that become named either, right? Like there, like if you have a subscription series, you can name it after a particular sponsor who did a $25,000 sponsorship. Say, hey, every year we call this the so and so bank series, right? So there's some naming opportunity there, and we've also tried different years of having sponsorships tied directly to a particular subscription or to particular series. I should the way to say that.
Yeah.
So this series is underwritten by. So when you're marketing that a show that's in that series,
Yeah.
whose logos go in the logo farm for that, and they are clear on when they're going to be represented. But again, I just think it adds complexity over time. If you can build relationships to people who care about what you do by doing hard ticket one-off shows that are of quality, they're done well, and the experience that people have when they come is exceptional. And you and your development director and everyone on your team is there to greet people. You've done wealth screenings of everyone in your market, anyone who's buying tickets, and you know who to talk to and how to build relationships. I don't think there's any miss there. I really don't. Um, and again, once you're in the model, it's hard to unwind because so much of your financial planning relies on the model.
Yeah, yeah, that's the thing, right? I mean, that's this crossroads moment. Those who like Jefferson Center for 22 years, you've had this set up this way, so it's very hard to remove it.
And the subscribers. In fact, I had a subscriber email me when we were presenting maybe some changes to how we present the season. This is before the pandemic, the season right before pandemic. We we were toying with the idea of presenting shows, and again doing sort of the pick option, right? You might choose to come see a blues show, and then the next thing you do is an Americana show, but it turns out you also really love this light classical thing. I don't know, these are bad examples, but they sort of pick options. And so I sent some emails and set up some phone calls with some of our historic um, subscribers, and they were very clear on one thing. And one said it this way: you'll have to kill me and pry my seats out of my dead hands. It really is about the seats.
Interesting.
They
Well, so
want
in the membership
those
structure,
two
right?
seats. They
Yeah, so
want those
those seats,
seats.
yeah.
What they're protecting is the location of their experience. It's the
Mhm.
seats. That's what they're protecting.
Well, so for the membership, our memberships, right? The depending what level you are, is the point you have access to purchase the tickets.
Early.
Yeah, so the
Yeah.
highest donors have the first access, and then down the line, and so theoretically, right, if you were a high dollar donor, um,
You could
you
always get those same two
you
seats.
could always get those seats within reason, right, or close to those seats. So you can accomplish that if you have a membership structure. You can accomplish that for some of your higher donors, and we also have some of our higher dollar donors. We also hold on to seats. Like
Right.
we have a donor, um, and there is a box, and it's Pat's box, right? And Pat always gets first rights at that box, and our development team does that, right? Like specifically for this donor. So I think we definitely have ways around that, and then and it tends to be, I mean, to your point too about the ultimate demand, it tends to be that if you are even giving at the $75 level and you have that initial access, you're going to be able to get some really good seats. Like you're going to be able to get in that access before everybody else does, and you can really, you can pick an aisle, you can make sure you're in a certain part of the orchestra where you prefer to be. So you can still provide those. I'd be curious, Cyrus. I mean, I think, I mean, getting back to this sort of question where we think this is going. I mean, do you feel that there is a future that the Jefferson Center untangles from this subscription series? Do you feel like it will just naturally over time end up moving away? I mean, where do you think you all are going, and where do you want it to go?
Uh, so the churn of the arts work tells me that it may be cyclical. Maybe there's a time again where people start buying back into the idea that subscriptions are a way to sustain an arts organization, that the programming is so dynamic and the aesthetic is so well known from the person doing that programming and presenting that people don't want to miss a chance to see something. There's community in it, and that younger people at some point uh, will look for opportunities to connect in that way. That the vision into the length at which they're willing to plan their schedule increases over time as they get older. So I think some of it may be cyclical, and like everything else in the arts. But where I'm sitting, I don't think there's a subscription model. I don't think there's a world where we generate additional subscriptions in the next 3 to 5 years. I don't think our subscription numbers increase. What
Mhm.
we're doing is we're doing less of the subscription series shows. We're doing more of the one-off shows.
Interesting. Okay.
Yeah, and I think that trend will continue slowly until most of those subscribers either age out or we end up not booking enough to compel them to subscribe, which is going to happen anyway. Again, because as they get older, what we're able to provide to them that resonates with their generation is going to be harder
Speaks on less. Yeah.
to book. You know what I mean? It really is. I know I use this too much and it's not particularly sexy in the arts, but it really is going to be just about supply and demand. So
Yes.
if I thought I could supply a 3-show series in my club room, that would really, really excite 20 and 30-year-olds, the millennial generation, for example, and there was a feeling that by buying it, let's say it's $80 a person for all 3 shows, and they're 2 months apart, whatever. You get the point, right? You schedule them out, and people felt like, "Oh my god, this is a club I'd really like to be part of. These are 3 bands I never thought I'd see in this market, and I mean, let me just go ahead and buy all 3. There's a discount in buying all 3. I wanna go ahead and get these on my calendar." Initially, of course, they're gonna do that because 'cause they're compelled by what is being programmed in the room. They're excited about the acts, right? Could I see that happening again? Yeah, but it starts with rebuilding it with a younger generation to encourage that kind of buying over time. I mean, we forget, interestingly enough, that every person in America that has a cell phone is in the midst of a subscription.
Yeah.
But yet in the arts, we're like, wow, the subscriber model. Everybody in this
That's a
country currently
great point. That's a
has
great
three
point.
or four subscriptions to Netflix and Hulu and Max, and
Yeah.
people have
People get in sometimes and get back out depending on what's
yeah,
going on.
we lost
Yeah.
faith in the model that people are willing to pay for something over time, but as you and I have talked, and this is all of the fodder now for why this, theater companies are in such trouble. What if it just turns out that if we were providing something that people wanted to see, that they would jump on a subscription in a heartbeat?
Yeah, before we got on the call, um, we were talking about an organization, and we were talking about an organization that was uh regional here for us, that does classical music and pops. And uh and if we were talking to arts leaders, we're kind of talk about what people want versus maybe what we think they need. How And I think the subscription series, we've been getting a lot too. I mean, I feel very much that what is pushing me very often here in the organization, that I think why I wanted to have this conversation, is that the membership model really does push me to a place where I'm very driven by what people want, as opposed to maybe what I think people could use. Um, and I can live with that somewhat. And I've kind of come to terms, I think, a bit with also what I personally am interested in or think has value. Um, it may not necessarily be a successful business plan, and B, that may not really be my job at the end of the day. In 2023, running an arts organization for a community, my job is to provide something that they value. and I'm sort of on a journey just trying to figure out what that is. Um, but there is an older model, right? There's a time, right, when arts leaders, what they were doing, when they were curators. They were creating. Um, this is the old the Lord
Yeah.
theater model. That is what it is. The
Yeah.
artistic director was a curator. They were
Well,
curating a
yes.
series of experiences.
Yeah, I honestly do think that will be cyclical, right? There is, my programming manager here who is, has 98% of the responsibility for booking everything that's happening in my venue, every deal structure, every idea, going to the APAP conference and having a conversation about what's touring, talking about what we could produce internally or in this market or in this region that would be interesting. She's in her 30s. She's delightful and will figure out a way to curate it she's already curating in exactly the way that you say she is. So I was just thinking, now that we're talking about this, right? Everybody talks about founders syndrome. And of course, what's happening in major theater companies, but also in the, arts presenting world, is a lot of founders of these performing arts centers are the folks that had involved in making sure that it was programmed and curated over time are aging out. You
Mhm.
know, they're also at an age where new energy needs to come in. And I think very clearly for me, back on a conversation about supply and demand, you know, my programming manager is going to be fine doing a show for 87 30-year-olds in our small room.
Mhm.
And then maybe over 5 or 10 years, she builds that and builds that and builds that. And then she's getting 4 or 5 or 600 people interested in the shows that she's booking in the main room. It's just time for that younger generation to build that kind of relationship through programming.
Mhm.
I don't think the brand of the organization of Jefferson Center is enough. It's really that they're going to say, I believe in what she's doing. I know if she's booking something, it's something I want to see, even though I've never heard of it. And I think that's still really going to matter if you want to increase the number of people buying, if you want to increase the audience you have for what you do.
How do you think this differs in a smaller community versus a major market, or does it?
Not, and I love this question, and I don't think it matters at all other than scale.
Mhm.
Because I think it might be easier in a small market.
Yeah, to build the relationships and
Yeah,
yeah,
you
and it's
know,
not as competitive. You're not competing against
I
other.
mean,
I mean,
no,
there's some redundancy, but
yeah, they're not right. Other than the redundancy and the fact that, because of SVOG money, there was a lot of programming happening for the last couple of years. People were going hog wild, man. Let's get everything in our hall we can. Let's book every venue every night, kind of stuff. And of course, that the demand kept up with a lot of that, which has been fortunate for all of us. But that demand is going to wane if we really are looking at a soft landing or not soft landing, if we're looking at recessionary type thinking and increased inflation over time, or if inflation is not lowered, we're all going to be in a situation where we're revisiting the number of people we can expect to come out and see what we do. But you're right. In a small town, you're going to be at the supermarket next to a person who bought a ticket to a show, or you're going to see them at the coffee shop,
Mhm.
and they're going to talk to you about their experience. And so I think that part is easier. But supply and demand, it'll really be about venue size and whether or not there's a critical mass of people and underwriting necessary to sustain those full-time positions that
Yeah,
to do the shows. And that's not, I know, not a part of the conversation here, but in the end, you and I, that's what we're constantly thinking about.
yep,
Even the most creative programming in America, done by the most savvy, interesting, creative person that's generating momentum for your community and for your market, may not be enough for that person to generate the kind of income necessary to sustain their position in an organization.
yeah. This subsidy, and I do want to bring something back really quickly on the membership model because Cyrus spoke to this. We do with the membership model. We have, you know, we also have a underwriting sponsorship program that is based on serieses. So I want to make clear too, we still have some programming pressure, but it doesn't come from the ticket buyer. I mean, it does in the sense whether they buy the tickets or not, but we don't have a subscription base putting pressure on us. But we do have these corporate entities that we are trying to book shows for in regards to what they're interested in at points. Now, all the companies are different. Some companies care, some companies don't really care. Their giving reasons are varied. But it came up yesterday. We were beginning to realize that we were going to be releasing some shows in the new year, and we knew that we had some corporate entities. I'll use Black History Month as an example. So we know that we have a Black History Month series. We knew that we have a corporation locally that likes to support activities such as Black History Month, Juneteenth, and we needed to begin to cater our messaging around that and fill that series up for them and make sure. Now, this is a positive programming thing I'm talking about, but we also have some negative things. Like comedy is an example, right? Where we need underwriting for a comedy series, and corporations want clean comedy, right? They don't want something that's controversial or political. Now, that may sell, right? But we can't get the underwriting for it because the corporation doesn't want to be tied to Whitney Cummings talking about something sexual, right? So I want to share too, we still have those pressures with the membership structure because at the end of the day, these programs have to be subsidized. And so whoever is subsidizing it, right, whether it be a subscriber, whether it be a corporate entity, right, there is going to be somebody, right, putting some sort of pressure on your decision making. Like it's kind of unavoidable.
Yeah, that's well said. I think that is exactly the case. I've experienced, and you may have too, losing sponsors because they used it as in our case, it was Buddy Guy, the blues artist, which I know you guys
Oh,
have.
yeah, we talked, yeah.
And Buddy Guy, the most important living blues guitar player, right? He also likes the F-bomb very, very much and likes to use it very, very loudly. So we lost the sponsorship because we put that show in a series, right? It was part of a subscription. And this person who was a sponsor was also a subscriber. He brought some business potential, candidate clients, I guess. And they were offended by the show, and we lost them both as a subscriber and a sponsor. And so there's risk in that too, right? There's another risk in a subscription is even though they might take a chance with you on something, they might end up seeing something they really hate.
Yeah.
And that has happened here, an artist that maybe, again, as your example for comedy, stretches the boundaries of adult humor in the middle of their performance unexpectedly. And you could lose people. And when you are in a subscription model, even losing one person who subscribes is a very, very weighty feeling. The solution in the end for all of us is to have enough consistent funding, either from endowment structure or from corporate underwriting and other underwriting from your community, consistent over time and not variable, that you can do the right thing for your community, regardless of what structure it might be happening in. That's the key.
Yeah, and finding the right partners for subsidy. Right?
Yeah.
And I think that's also the thing. I think if you're, in your community who, I'm often wary at points with, if we're just going to name it subsidy, right? Donor dollars or sponsorships, whatever that is. I'm often very wary when we are seeking subsidy from somebody that I know may not necessarily align with our own values as an organization. So, I think I would say that too. You have funding targets and donors or sponsors that you're going towards. I think keep in mind, right? How stable that will be depending on, what you are as an organization going to present or not going to present. So I think in conclusion with this, Cyrus, I think what I'm kind of coming to, and I wasn't sure as we came into this, is that if you were in a smaller community and you were in a subscription setup, it sounds like, right, go ahead and hold on to it, but let let it ride, I guess, maybe is what we're
Yeah,
saying.
adapt over time, put together a
Yeah,
5-year model for subscriptions not being the true basis of your programming, but
yeah. Come
align
up with
it.
other plans.
Yeah, but align it with your artistic mission, right? Align that shift so that you aren't losing the option to take artistic risk and book things that really matter. Um, I mean, real quick as we're closing this out, the model that actually, works for people historically is you do a Broadway series where everybody comes, right? And then you have a series where you're doing more artistic stuff and fewer people come, but it's underwritten by the Broadway series. That's the classic Performing Arts Center model. There's nothing wrong with that either, you know? So yeah, but I think you're right, Jeff. I would say if you're in a subscription model in a small market, ride it until its end, but be thinking about what the new model looks like and think cyclically. Maybe there's a way for a completely new type of series that is interesting to a different generation, then maybe you build that back over time. It may matter at some point in terms of fundraising when 30-year-olds then become 60-year-olds or 55-year-olds and have the income necessary to support a campaign you have to keep your venue open.
Yeah. And I'll say, 5 years into our membership model, it works okay. I would
Yeah.
say it's not ideal. I think some of the things that, we've spoken to in regards to sort of the relationship that you have of the programs themselves to the ticket buyer is obviously going to be stronger when there's a subscription base, and that is good and bad, what comes with that. But the membership structure, as long as you continue to think about what that value is to the member. I think is going to be really important. And there's going to be different types of members. There's going to be members where it's transactional, where they are either just for that particular show or interested in getting a ticket, or they are, interested in, making sure that they get, the concessions line that's faster or whatever that could be. But a lot of those members, ultimately, at the end of the day, we find most of them are people that are attracted to supporting the nonprofit institution, and that's what they're doing. And then, as a thank you, we say, "Hey, we're going to give you these perks." You may use them, you may not use them, but the gesture is something that we want to make sure that you feel and you see. And at the end of the day, no matter what, though, right? I think for arts leaders out there in communities, it is about connecting to your patrons. It is about
That is
connecting.
it. Yeah. And we're just now getting to a point in the arts where we're intelligently looking at data on how sticky those relationships are. You
Yeah.
know, if you ever looked at, if you look at data back to the cell phone subscription model, people are very sticky to their cell phone companies, for a while it's because they were gonna, oh shit, I'll lose my number. I gotta keep my number, but now of course numbers are portable, but think about the stickiness of that relationship. Is someone a member in the first year but not in the second year? And it turns out they remember because they wanted to be sure they got tickets to this one particular show. So you were right. The goal is relationship building, community building, and increasing the risk tolerance you have to do things that matter in your market. And as long as you're doing that, I think the model can be whatever works to do that.
Yeah. 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 So, Cyrus, I think on that is, in this interesting pivot moment, for arts organizations with subscriptions, I think it is just getting back to what was the purpose of the subscription in the beginning. What was that, right? It was loyalty to the institution, support of the institution, and an ability to have a dialogue with your constituents. And that's the most important thing. And I think with the membership structure, just as a final thing, I think work as hard as you can to make that um, less transactional when possible. How can you help those members feel connected to the mission of the organization and not just early access to tickets and drinks? And I think when and however it is that you can do that, I think that's really critical. Well, Cyrus, thank you. I've been interested in utilizing Cyrus more throughout the year. I've got a feeling if I can coerce him into coming more often, you'll probably hear more from Cyrus. These conversations I have with him are really valuable to me, and hopefully they'll be valuable to you. So Cyrus, thank you so much for this and being the beginning of season 2 of Small Town Big Arts. Thanks everybody for joining us. Thanks, Cyrus.
Thanks.
Thank you so much for joining us for this episode of Small Town Big Arts. Remember to rate and review us and share with your friends. To learn more, visit us at smalltownbigarts.com. Until next time, I'm your host, Jeffrey Kirschner.